Duke, you suck.
You shut your mouth!
Welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. And now, Duke Durango.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. It is my pleasure and honor to be sitting here with my good friend. I was thinking about it today, Ross. I believe as of now, we go back 25 years. My good friend, Ross Hart. Welcome to the show, Ross.
It's a pleasure to be on. Yeah, it's definitely 25 years for wrestling. It might be a few years before that for teaching from our Crescent Heights high school days.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I know. I had you and Bruce when I was
there. So yeah, so I think I was instructing you in a few settings there. So
yeah, you've been a mentor of mine.
Wrestling, yeah.
You've been a mentor for a very long time, Ross. I can say that.
No, it was an honor for me for sure.
Well, the one thing I've often said is if anybody ever thought I was even half a decent worker, I give full credit to you and Bruce and the way you trained us. And that's no bullshit. I think, when I look at the crew of guys that came out of the dungeon when you and Bruce were the sole trainers down there, we were really fortunate to sit under your learning tree, as the catchphrase is today. And I appreciate everything you did for my career. And
absolutely, you guys were a great class. And you had some great athletic backgrounds too, which helped a lot. But you've done a lot of amateur wrestling. Your brother Dean had, I remember the cauliflower ears he had to prove it, and Greg Pollock as well. Greg wrestled with I think Bob Eklund and Alex Karmas, and some pretty big guys.
Well, those are the guys we came up with, right?
You guys as well, so.
Yeah, when we were in high school, those were the guys in university, right? The Bob Eklunds and Gutterson brothers, and the Clive Llewellyn and Alex Karmas.
Yeah.
So we've been really, now that I kind of just take a second to reflect on that, we've been really, really fortunate our entire lives that we've always had elite level coaching. You know what, Ross, I'm going to be honest before we even get into too much here. I'm just going to ask you right out, because I think this is a question that I get asked a lot. Do you think that you guys will ever start another training facility? Do you think you'll ever start training more wrestlers?
I think time is kind of running out. For one thing, we maybe don't have the ideal facility or training ground. I think we've got one ring still, which is in Bruce's backyard as we speak.
Right.
But it's just so many factors. I think there's not an expiry date on our knowledge and what we can train or impart. I still think Bruce is the best trainer in the business. He still has a great grasp of that basic training. How to lock up, how to fall, how to go into the ropes, and psychology, and how to work the crowd into your matches, whether you're heel or a baby face. And so much of that is lacking in a lot of the schools I see today, where it's just focusing on high spots and doing hardcore stuff. But I think a lot of us have kind of moved on, and it's probably a combination of those things. Our age and not just quite having the right facility. And right now, it's tough during a pandemic. Wrestling school with all the
certainly don't want to be opening next week.
Yeah, so it would be nice though. I think there's always some future stars out there, but I'll be honest, Bruce and I have looked at some of the current stars we've seen in Alberta, and nothing compared to that class we had in 97, 98 with you and Greg Pollock and Dean Durango, and the good veterans we had like Tiger Mahatma Khan and Richard Pond, and even Johnny Devine, and some of the others that didn't last that long in the industry, but were great prospects.
We were really. We were blessed with an embarrassment of riches on a certain level. You know what I mean? We had so many so many different guys, so many different personalities. You got the Eddie Mustangs,
Yes.
right down, right down to the
Yeah.
D Dwight Davises that, you're not the biggest
Yeah.
guy in the world, but all, could do anything and would do anything you want him to do in a ring.
Yeah, with the Marvin Pope, he was a great football player.
Yes,
Was
absolutely.
one of the top Stampeders alumni, and had so much potential. Probably we didn't have enough bigger heavyweights to work with him, but
Yeah, for
he
sure.
had a lot of talent and raw power for sure. Even
he was,
Dix, great talent.
and he was both of those guys were incredible athletes.
Yeah, incredible athletes. They probably had some attitude problems, I think, and his temper would sometimes get the better of him. And it was kind of sad how his career ended, how his life ended. But what an incredible athlete he was.
Yeah, again, somebody that could literally do anything you wanted athletically.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was kind of a combination of Apollo Creed and Sweet Daddy Siki.
Marvin Pope always amazed me too, because he came. He was at a point where his body had broken down to a point he couldn't play CFL football anymore. But then he came in our wrestling room and still the best athlete in that room. That was always something that I think was lost on some of us, because we were so small and light and nimble that we didn't realize this guy was 260 pounds with hip bursitis and could keep up with any one of us.
Oh yeah, incredible. But it was a great class. It really was, and everybody I think had different strengths and features, and it was great. We would always mix up the combinations. You would never work or be paired with the same guy. And in all the drills, whether it's the bump drills at the beginning or just the session where we kind of wind up at the end. And sometimes it was just full scrimmaging. We put different guys together, and I think it was good because you didn't get conditioned, to just one guy. You worked with a variety of different guys. So I think it brought out the best in everyone. It was really a great graduating class. And you were such a good leader there. And you motivated everybody, and nobody dragged their asses. Somebody wasn't working hard or pulling their shirt, the others called them for it. So it was a high standard that we maintained with all the boys, and you guys did a great job.
Well, and again, that's testament to what was expected of us. I think when we looked at what the pedigree that had come out of the dungeon, and even if we only even just looked at the Hart family and the body of work the Hart family did, that's a pretty high pedigree on its own. And then when you start to factor in everybody that was trained by your dad and yourself and Bruce, that's a pretty lofty standard to try and keep up to. So I think that you guys not demanded, because you were always really good with us, but definitely there was a high bar set as far as what you guys were looking for from us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really take a lot of pride in the fact that we're safe. A few guys got injured, from time to time, but
that's usually the boys zigging when we should be zagging, right? That's usually not due to bad instruction.
No, sometimes guys would slip maybe, or some guys, Kerwin, had just a little too much power, and that mat wasn't light, that had very little give, there wasn't much padding there, and taking 20, 30 snap suplexes and wheels and body slams and saltos, it takes its toll on you, but everyone was very safe. We always emphasized safety and treating the guy you're wrestling with care, because their body's in your hands, so, and it was great. It really paved the way for some of the younger generation too, a little later, like Harry and TJ and Natty and quite a few others, Apocalypse, Dave Swift, some of the guys that came a little later,
right?
Robert McManus, Jared Evans, some of them, but that core
Dave Swift was a guy I always thought that he'd, not all of it, obviously not all of us made it, but Dave Swift was somebody that I really thought was going to do okay. I was a little disappointed his kind of career ended up the way it did.
Yeah, I think he had good mechanics and sometimes just a little hard-headed, and had some opportunities. I had one tour of Japan there, but I think he who he was with. I think he was with Harry trains with him, Josh Barnett, and Josh was wrestling with New Japan and doing sort of pseudo wrestling martial arts, and I don't know what happened, but Dave was disrespectful to him, and I don't think Dave really was aware or knew who he was, and when Joe Daigo found out about that, that was it. It was Dave's last tour there.
Right.
You have to follow protocol and keep your mouth shut sometimes. And
well, by the time Dave would have been there, Josh Barnett would have already been a legend in Japan.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just like, and Josh would have ripped him to pieces. If they'd actually gone to blows. Who Josh was somebody he messed around with, but the PR aspect of that was very damaging for Dave, because New Japan wasn't interested in him, and Joe Daigo kind of wrote him off as a student, and that was unfortunate. And the opportunities went to other wrestlers instead, like Apocalypse and Harry and TJ. So yeah,
right. And obviously, who I'll put those. Pardon me, sorry.
No, just your attitude and level of respect, I guess, for promoters and the legends, the experienced guys, always has to be there. Even if it's something you're feigning a little bit. It's just because the reputation goes a long ways in the industry. It really does. Well,
and that's something I can remember telling you telling me fairly early, because I'm known as somebody that can generally have a lot to say. And I remember you telling me fairly early on, kind of be careful who you're talking to, because these veterans, they don't forget what you say.
No, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, it was the same respect that you could command from guys in PWA, not just because you were a booker, but you were a leader in the dressing room, and, and you brought out the best of guys in all your matches, so that level of respect always has to be there, no matter who you are, whether you're starting out or you've been in the business for a few years, or you're a seasoned pro, so, right. and you always commanded it.
See, Ross, and this is the stuff, like it kills me that even that somebody's not bringing you in to do clinics, just that you can share this stuff. Please, my friends out there that have wrestling schools, can you bring Ross Hart in to talk to your students and teach them this respect for the business that he richly speaks of? Because that to me, Ross, is really what's missing right now. Is that kind of that fundamental respect, not just for each other, but for the business.
I don't know whether maybe it's the fact too many get in easily, or they don't go through the necessary training. They go through one or two workouts, and then before you know it, they're on a ring crew, and then they're waiting for their first match, and so they really haven't learned properly how to wrestle, but they also haven't learned etiquette, or respect, just because it hasn't been ingrained in them, and that's unfortunately missing. And I think it's a drawback of a lot of wrestling schools today.
Right. Well, and oftentimes, like you see guys open wrestling schools, or they're not even open wrestling schools, or I'll just even say just training guys, and you realize, like, that guy knows how to bump, and he's had 100 matches, but what does he really know? What is he really passing on to those kids that he's training? Right. Like it's, I was really, really happy when Lance opened a school, right? Because then we had somebody, now I'm fairly happy that Johnny Devine's opened a wrestling school now, because we've got somebody that's been around a bit and done some tours of some places, and, worked with a lot of different people, and a lot of, could sometimes take a little far, but definitely will make sure people respect the business.
And I think we'll teach them properly, so they're not a danger to themselves or other wrestlers. But certainly, if you've got a good nucleus of guys, that school, that class will go better. If you've got 4 or 5 decent guys, it will rub off on some of those other guys that maybe don't have the skill or condition or the the athletic background, but you know, it's certainly not for everybody, wrestling. You know, it shouldn't be something you want to do just because you've watched it on TV or you play video games or but you know, as Bruce, I think Cedric Hathaway often said, if you're going into wrestling, it's maybe because you're a fuck up everything else. But you know, in some ways, I suppose that's true with some of the candidates, but also, you know, when I look at some guys who were really genuine athletes, you know, who had martial arts background stuff, amateur wrestling, boxing, or even UFC, you know, or just football, I guess. But unfortunately, it seems to draw some of these types that just who love watching it and fantasizing about it, but they really just don't have the athletic skills or the conditioning or desire, you know, to
yeah. And well, and I think that's come with simply the exposure of the business that, you know, people throw the word. I'll always give people, if you want to tell me the business is fixed, predetermined outcome, if you want to say those things to me, you'll never get a reaction from me. But if you say fake, I start getting upset because the injuries are real. You know what I mean? The stunts we do, the bumps we take, that stuff sometimes does really, you know, it really hurts. And I think they minimize that a lot of times when they talk about fake wrestling. So that allows that, you know, kind of any moron to get into it because they think it's fake, and it takes the athleticism out of it. It takes the art out of it, that it's just this thing that anyone can do. And I mean, it kind of is, but it also kind of isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and wrestlers deserve to be billed as athletes because they are, you know.
Yeah.
The moves, the timing, the choreography, you know, and a lot of the impact moves you take, a lot of the injuries you suffer, whether it's predetermined or not. You know, that requires a lot of athleticism. It really does. Yeah. So
I think it's the least respected professional sport.
It should never be referred to as just actors or stuntmen.
Yeah, for sure. And don't get me wrong, there's guys out there that I look at and I'm not going to piss on anyone's name right now, but there are wrestlers that I've looked at one point or another and said that guy's solely a stuntman. Do you know what I mean? Like all he does is kill himself. And there are guys out there like that, I think, but at the same time, I won't also tear down their art form if that's what they choose to do. It's not for everybody. It's a niche market. And I mean, you know, not my cup of tea, but you know.
One thing I've seen a lot of great guys come out of NXT in the WWE, but what I often see do, because they're doing everything the same way, you know, their reversals, they'll come out of the corner and elbow somebody, and everybody's doing things the exact same way, you know, because that's the way they've been taught, but there's very little variety or things that stand out or that are unique. With Stampede, you know, we would bring in guys from Japan and some from Mexico and occasionally from Germany or Europe, you know, we had Great Britain, and they would all show something different, you know. So the basics were all there.
So many different styles.
Yeah, but different takedowns, reversals, you know, definitely different finishing moves, and that's something I certainly see lacking when one training school has one style and one format, and you're taught this is the only way you can do things, you know, and very few guys really stand out, you know, or you can set apart from the others. So, whereas before, you know, Stampede in Japan, we choose to bring in a lot of wrestlers from abroad. You can see something different in every match. Everybody had something unique or unusual, you know, as long as it was safe.
Yeah, well, and I remember even Morrow kind of getting mad at us when we were first on TV with Stampede, because he said, you know, it's hard to make 8 of the same matches sound exciting. And I said, well, we're all trained by the same person, and we've all come up together, so it's really hard for us. But what it did is made me realize, okay, I need to change what I'm doing in the ring, because obviously we look like 16 robots out there. You know what I mean? So it was a harsh criticism at the time, and I didn't want to hear it, but it was the 100% thing that I think our locker room needed to hear for the boys to, you know, break out of the shell and start becoming more of a worker than just a wrestler.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, you know, always a good idea if you're on any match in the card, especially if you're on a later match, watch what previous matches have done. So you're not going out there and repeating the same, false finishes or moves that somebody else has done. And you never should you use somebody else's finishing move as a high spot, or something that somebody just kicks out. You really shouldn't be using it at all,
Yeah.
So many of these guys don't realize that, you'll see, 3 or 4 tombstones in a match, or 5 or 6 German suplexes, and it's repeating what's been done in earlier matches, but it's also killing somebody's finishing move because somebody else kicked out from it in an earlier match, and then somebody else is supposed to use that as a finisher later. So a lot of that's just being aware and watching earlier matches, and and you try to use your own moves, and never waste a good submission move on a 2 counter just as a high spot. There's so many different things you can do. And so,
well, and I think that's when you don't know how to work, you have to resort to that shit. And I don't mean to sound disrespectful, because like you say, that's the way a lot of guys were trained. But I think that a lot of guys don't know how to fill those gaps. So they just have to go big move to big move to big move to big move, because they don't know that they can build it, because they don't know what to do in between. And I think that's what's really, really missing. The WWE, in my opinion, if I could fault them in any way, is that, they don't want the workers looking in the cameras. They don't want the workers really looking to the crowd too much. They don't want that interaction. And to me, that's where the business is making that emotional connection with the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, if you're a baby face, you play that role. You don't play to the crowd too much, but you draw from them for inspiration when you're selling, and approval when you do something spectacular. When you're a heel, you play that role as well. You involve the crowd in your matches, right? Incite them. You can be insulting toward them or put them down, but nowadays you can't go overboard. You can't say anything racist or
half the
sexist,
shit I used to say, I'd be in big trouble for saying now.
So we're a lot more censored than we used to be, but you can still respond to fans and get them involved in your matches, but not go overboard. But too many young wrestlers I don't see doing that. They're performing in the ring, and they never look at the crowd. They never engage them. They never respond to them. Sometimes maybe when they cheer for a spot that went well, but that's about it. And there's just not enough wrestlers that involve the fans. When you're a heel, you play your role to the limit. And you didn't want fans cheering for you, because that works against what you're trying to get across in the match. You're a villain, and you're a cheater, and you're breaking the rules. And you're going to try and get away with whatever you can behind the referee's back. But some guys as heels, they like that reaction they get from the fans when they do something well, and they almost encourage the fans to cheer them. That all that does is kind of divide the crowd, and you get a much more limited response. That's certainly not.
It can hijack a show, though, because what can happen is those fans, people work, something that maybe people don't understand is people work on what's called a trained emotional response. And when that starts to work in a group dynamic, like a crowd of people at a wrestling show, once one person starts to cheer for that heel, another person will follow, and another, and another, and another. And the next thing you know, the next heel that comes out is screwed. He can't get any heat because all of a sudden the crowd's all cheering for the bad guys. And it can create some real issues. I'd always just tell the fan to shut up. I don't need your help. You didn't really need to do too much to turn them back against you.
No, and that's something you should always do. You don't have to go overboard or do anything physical or say anything that's racist or sexist, but you can just shut them up basically and dismiss them, put them down basically, and that usually will neutralize them at least. So they're not competing with the fans that are trying to cheer the babyface. That's what you want. I think wrestling's still a matter of good versus evil. Hero versus villain, and that concept always works. Even though it's been watered down quite a bit. And that now sometimes you can't tell the difference between the heels and baby faces, but usually that formula was what always works best.
Well, to your point earlier, there's a lot of people that work heel now that don't want to be booed, right? They want to be the bad guy because they want to be able to do that move set and they want to be able to choke and pull hair and hit people with chairs and do all those fun things. But when the crowd calls them a piece of shit, they don't want that kind of heat. You know what I mean? They don't hear that as the cheer. They hear that as an insult. Where, to me, a true heel, like when you see Jake Roberts working Macho Man and Elizabeth, do you think he gave a shit what those people said to him at that point? Those boos are cheers, and I think that's one thing that a lot of heels have to understand is just do your job, because those boos are cheers. Don't get caught up on what they're saying to you. And also, if you're going to be a heel and you think you should bring your girlfriend to ringside, be careful, because they're going to say really, really, really rude things to your girlfriend, and you need to be prepared to take that as well.
Good idea. You know, she's going to be in the line of fire, and she'll take exception to somebody saying something really derogatory or personal, and then it just becomes a distraction from what you're trying to do in the ring. So yeah.
My wife was around wrestling for 20 years. At no point did she ever become a conversation that she would ever valet, and she was never once in our locker room.
No, and I never saw her sitting at ringside.
She just said that's where the wrestlers go. I'm not going. I've even said, like, cut through the locker room. No, I'll go through the front door. She would never come in the locker room.
Nope. And really, wives or husbands of women wrestlers have no place there. Yes, you can come to the show and support them, but don't be at ringside. Be further back. Where you can analyze and watch the shows in privacy. And don't get involved in the politics of business either.
No, and that's the thing is. I mean, it was never something I don't want to come across like I would take a strong stance against it if I seen somebody's, boyfriend or girlfriend in the locker room, because it wasn't a hill to die on. But to me, I've always had the feeling that the locker room is our sanctuary. That's that's the one place where we're just allowed to be. Everywhere else in that building, we have to be on. When we're in a locker room, we can just be. And so I don't want you, dragging your friends through there or whatever. I mean, if you're bringing your kids through there, that's a different conversation. But I don't want you dragging your friends and girlfriends and stuff like that through there, because I don't want to have to be on all the time. I want to be able to just chill in the locker room, go over my stuff, and and get out there and try and put on the best show I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all right, so now let's go back a little bit. We jumped way far forward. One of the things, I mean, you and I have talked so much wrestling, but to be honest, you're, out of all the people that I know, kind of the best in the Hart family. I kind of know your stories, at least, to be honest with you, Ross. I've heard a lot of stories about, Diana and Owen, and obviously Brett, and, I've talked a bit to Keith. But you and I have never really talked about kind of, I know you love the Flintstones, but that's, do you still watch Flintstones?
When I grew up, we had 2 channels of TV, so far, we couldn't get in CBC and CFAC, which is what carried Stampede Wrestling, on Saturday afternoons. But the only shows we got to see other than that were Flintstones and Bugs Bunny.
Okay.
Bugs Bunny, I think, on Saturdays for an hour, and then Flintstones usually was like Monday to Friday from 4:30 to 5 or something, and that was it.
Right.
There wasn't a lot else on TV. There was maybe CFL games on weekends and a little bit of wrestling, but not a lot else, but it's interesting. Even some of those cartoon characters were similar to some of the wrestlers, like I could make a lot of comparisons between Fred Flintstone and Jim Neidhart, because Jim was always trying to pull something off, get away with something behind my dad's back. My dad would always catch him, or Ellie would catch him red-handed, and Jim was always trying to talk his way out of something, much like Fred, and a lot of the villains, the Road Runners, the Yosemite Sams, there's some comical, but there some wevil tendencies in them, and we'd see a lot of them in some wrestlers, guys like J.R. Foley and Tweet Tommaso, who are always cheating or trying to bribe an official, or throwing salt in somebody's eyes, or ring the bell 2 minutes before the time limit had expired in a match when their star is about to submit and lose.
Oh, that's a brilliant
you know,
finish.
so yeah,
That's
so
brilliant.
there's some interesting parallels between those cartoon characters and a lot of wrestlers, and of course, the heroes, the ones that had to overcome all of that, and always had sympathy of the fans. They were much like the Road Runners and the Bugs Bunny types. Bugs was a little sneaky, I guess. He would always be one step ahead of the villains, but
Yeah.
it's still,
He was
the
like the
baby
Hulk
face is
Hogan.
always-
He was like the Hulk Hogan baby face. Bugs Bunny. He
Yeah,
was
pretty
always
much
just one step
untouchable.
ahead.
You never saw Bugs Bunny get beaten up too much or
No.
take a fall. Just very elusive. So
Yeah, he wasn't
But,
doing the honors
yeah,
too often, Bugs Bunny.
yeah, for sure. So,
Yeah.
but but I grew up watching wrestling, and I loved it so much. And I can say that I've had a lot of different roles. I did some wrestling, but really my forte was working behind the scenes quite often with the promotion or releases, organizing press conferences, things like that. Long before the day of the internet, we
Yeah.
had to meet a lot of fans in person. These autograph sessions and arranging interviews on radio or TV to hype a show, and that was all important. So I did a lot of that, writing for the program. I wrote for the White Press program. I think that helped me become a school teacher. Because I was writing so many programs and press releases. It kind of taught me how to write essays and personal and critical responses in literature. So teaching was far different from wrestling, and it was kind of an outlet for me. When I got out of wrestling completely, I learned a lot of my communication and writing skills from wrestling. Just
Right.
working in the office with my mom and dad. So yeah, and
Yeah, so one way or another, everything in your life, including teaching, is through wrestling.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, and Bruce and Keith were teaching for years. They were substituting, and it was a good solid career. For them and teaching at the same time. It was just amazing the notoriety they would get when they would walk into a junior high school in Calgary or a high school, and and said, that's Bruce Hart, that's Keith Hart, and subject content they learned in the classrooms, because all fans, all kids
Hey, sorry about that, everybody. Sorry about that, everybody. Having a few technical difficulties here. I'm back with Ross Hart. Sorry, we're just talking about Ross's teaching and sort of what led him into that. Obviously, Ross, you've been teaching for a lot of time, so obviously you love teaching.
Yeah, it's some of that's transferable too. When I worked out in the dungeon, there was a lot of communication to students, right? And a lot of repetitive drills and things like that. Well, some of that
Right.
works in the classroom as well, but it certainly helped me with my communication skills and really just trying to motivate students, bring the best out of students and engage them, whether it's a history lesson on the First or Second World War or nationalism, or if it's analyzing a novel or a movie or a play. But I think a lot of those skills I learned from wrestling certainly helped me with teaching for sure.
Right.
And really just teaching students life skills, right? And it's
and
certainly
something that
about
I've
subject
always,
matter, but also
if I can pump your tires, and I'm going to pump your tires for a
second.
second here. Something that a lot of people don't know is that you work with what I'd consider to be at-risk youth. That's been, as long as I've known you, you've kind of taught at-risk youth. That's a hard job. And a lot of people don't know teaching's hard enough, But when you factor in that a lot of these kids don't have a daily routine, or sometimes don't have a home to go to, or you work in an interesting environment, and I think that's extremely commendable.
Yeah. Yeah, in the outreach system, you deal with a lot of kids with different struggles. Some with short attention spans, learning problems, ESL problems, anger management, addictions, coming from broken families, financial struggles. They're a lot of them are very challenging, and
that must teach you patience for dealing with wrestlers.
And just throwing the book at them or consequencing them doesn't work. They've been through that before. A lot of youth justice systems, they've been on probation, right? So I think you really have to use more of a reasoning approach and communicate with them and say, what are you wanting? What, focus on what their goals are and what they're trying to get out of this class or this lesson, and bring that out of them, rather than saying you have to do it my way. So you really do have to be flexible, and
you're more so meeting them where they're at,
and change your system completely, especially even with this. Yeah, exactly. And bring bring the best out of them. And there's different ways to do that. And
every one of those kids is probably his own challenging.
Right?
Every one of those kids is probably their own challenging, sort of enigma wrapped within a problem.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and most of them are probably good kids. They just don't know, they just don't have the skills.
No. And so many people have given up on them before, and they've had so many doors closed to them. So it's been very satisfying for me to help a lot of those kids either transition back to their regular school, or in some cases, the majority of them stuck with our system, just because we provide them so many different opportunities that other schools didn't, and a lot of them did graduate. And it's great when I see them a few years later and they thank me so much, for helping them get their diploma, or transition to a job, and the life skills you taught them, not just what you taught them in the classroom. So it's very rewarding. It's challenging in some ways. They deal with some hard kids, but the rewards are fantastic.
Well, this is maybe a weird question. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it, but have you considered simply through wrestling and through teaching how many lives you've actually touched? Have you ever actually sat back and thought about that? Because it's a lot. That's got to be a high number, man.
I guess so many, but I couldn't put a number on it, but it's a lot, Yeah. It's interesting though. Sometimes they'll look you up on Facebook or Twitter or something, and it's just somebody from like 20 or 25 years ago, and they'll talk about the impact that you had on them, and they'll let you know how well they're doing, which is great. And it's great hearing even from a lot of guys that came to our training camps, some who had pretty long, distinguished careers, like you and Johnny Devine, and then some others who didn't stick with it as long, but they had very positive experiences, So
right.
Another one I really like. I think you introduced him to us was Quick Kick Kirk Melnick. Just he was really good in ninjutsu and karate, and I think you and Greg Pollock introduced him to us. But
yeah, you bet.
Yeah, quiet guy.
One of the nicest guys you'd ever meet.
Yeah, just a pleasure to work in the ring. Never hurt anybody. Very safe, but just so many different types. I look at the friendship you had with Tiger Khan. I think you guys were a tag team. I think you had the tag team title, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I don't think him and I ever won them together. At the end of the tournament, we split, and he went on.
Carl LeDuc actually had them.
Yeah, LeDuc and I had them, and I think.
But you and Tiger never had the belts. I guess, but he had the singles title, right?
Yeah, he went off after that because we had that tournament, and he went and won the British Commonwealth title.
Right, but I know he did tag team with him a lot, and he always thought so well of you. You know, he had so much respect for you, and I remember he was kind of booking a lot of our shows on the road, and he had the highest praise for you
Oh,
and
thanks.
Greg Pollock. You know, just for your work ethic, your initiative. You know, and you just tried to get better with every match. And
Oh, man, I
setting
love
good
that guy. Like
examples
he
for
was
young
out of
boys
all
to
the people you
wrestle.
guys
And,
brought in, he was by far my favorite.
yeah,
You know,
you know,
him and Pound. Pound was
yeah,
like a brother to me too. Like I
yeah,
love that
and
guy.
you know, when we had that Stampede class, you know, and yeah, not a lot of guys were really experienced. We, some of the older class had kind of moved on. We had guys like Angel Acevedo that were still working. You know, maybe he was kind of past his prime, but he could still go in the ring. He could still fly and take great bumps.
He's
Um,
still working. He'd still sell his ass off for you.
oh
I think
yeah,
I
you know,
wrestled him. He was
and get
58 and he was still better than me.
yeah, and Tiger was such a good leader. You know, it was
Yeah.
sad how we lost him at far too young an age, and you know, probably someone who's certainly good enough, talented enough to make it in WWE or WCW, and you know, I think there was some politics there going
Yeah,
against
he
him.
was somebody I don't understand how he never made it. Like
You
I
know,
don't.
might have been race or skin color, I don't know, but guy who worked so hard and gave so much to the business, you know, but what a great leader he was, you know, and guys like you became better for it too, you know,
Yeah,
just
for
from being
sure.
around him and working with him too. So
Well, and him and then having like a Steve Hooper as a ref, you know, there's a name that I don't think gets enough credit for helping a lot of us young guys through because he'd been around on the West Coast for a while and had seen some things. So he brought a lot to the table when you brought him
great
as a ref.
referee, Steve, you know, and
Yeah.
good eye for the business, very logical, you know.
Yeah, I really liked working with him.
Yeah, you know, he would tell guys you don't do things that aren't logical. You know, it has to make sense from the audience's perspective. Like he would tell you, don't kick out at two throughout the whole match because then it means very little toward the end when you're doing all your false finishes. So at the beginning, you know, kick out right away or maybe at one, but little things like that. You know,
Actually, that's something he told me because I always thought I was showing the guy respect to kind of to take the extra count, you know. And he'd always say, like, no, don't be afraid to kick out without a count if it's the beginning of the match. That way, when 2 3/4 comes at the end, it means more. Okay, thanks, Steve. You know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What a great veteran presence as a referee he was. You know, he just a great guy too. So yeah.
Yeah, and then even Pound. I remember the first time I seen Pound in our locker room. And I mean, sometimes perception isn't reality because I seen him. He was just kind of this big guy, bit of a tummy on him.
Yeah.
You know, starting to go gray by then, but I don't think he was very old. I think he was just starting to go gray. And you know, I was like, oh geez, I met him. Obviously a super nice man. One of the nicest guys I met in the whole business. But then I got to watch him work and I was like, oh, that's why they brought him here.
Yeah,
he could go,
so,
man. He
so
could
good
work.
on the interviews, you know, like he was great, you know, that principals class he had with Bill Yates and Ruffy Silverstein, that was great, you know.
And he brought all those guys along with him, you know.
Yeah, and that was a great faction, you know, that really was. So yeah.
That was another big loss, you know, when we lost Principal Pound. That was you know, it was pause for the cause, man.
Just far too soon. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
so yeah,
for sure.
Do you keep in touch with some of these guys anymore? Do you see Greg Pollock anymore?
I don't see him that much. I probably talk to Pollock about every maybe 4 to 6 weeks. We still keep fairly in touch. He's pretty busy. He works out of town a lot, so I don't get to see him. We go for lunch actually usually around this time of year. I should get a hold of him. We usually go for lunch right around Christmas or something. And you know, he's got a little more time off and I've got some time off, so we'll get together then. But I talk to him monthly. I still talk to quite a few guys. You know, I still talk to Gamma Junior here and there. You know, back from the old school, I still talk to Ruffy once in a while. If I was ever out in Toronto, I'd definitely look him up again. You know who I talk to, I'm starting to talk to a lot again, is Rob Lefebvre. I talk to him quite a bit still.
Yeah, geez.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. Some like I think Rob McManus, he was like working security, I believe, for I believe it's for Premier Jason Kenney, you know. But
he started out. He was an Alberta sheriff. So I could be full of shit, but I believe he worked originally for when he first got that job at the higher end security there with the Alberta sheriffs. He worked for Allison Redford, then Jim Prentice, then Rachel Notley.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did pretty well for himself for a guy that came here, with a few shekels in his jeans looking to be a pro wrestler.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
And solid work ethic. That's what that comes from,
yeah, good hand in the ring, he always is kind of, cold and methodical, but a good heel. Definitely more suitable as a heel, I thought. But yeah, but a good hand in the ring. Definitely was. And Chris Steele, another one. Just a big kid. But very solid. Everything he does counts. Looks good. And just very unselfish guy in the ring.
I like to tease him that he makes it easy to sell.
Yeah, but, there's so many good athletes, and I apologize if I've overlooked any because.
And I'm sure we have, Ross, because when you look back at that class, there's no less than 20 guys that sort of came interchangeably through the room at the time. That any one of them could have made it. Any one of those guys, like Red Thunder, for instance. There's a guy that, how do you have these conversations without Red Thunder? I mean, how many of us did he, with his limited experience, he tried to bring us along?
Yeah. And it's funny, he went back quite a few years earlier. I think Bruce was training him as far back as early 90s, with another guy, I think First Nations guy from around Lethbridge or Fort McLeod, Roy Sioux guy or something, but I think he was half Chinese, maybe, or half Japanese, half maybe half Cree or something, but yeah, Red Thunder went back a long ways, but he when he had that whole class to work with, it was great because when Stampede wasn't running in the 90s, Bruce had some pretty small classes, sometimes only 4 or 5 wrestlers, and then when we kind of started the promotion up again, and the WWF was strong, and the Canadian Stampede was strong with the Foundation and Brett One and Davey and Jim and Coleman.
I remember going to that pay-per-view with your family and sitting in the players benches watching a pay-per-view. It was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it was, and it really increased the awareness and popularity of wrestling. So even for some of the older guys, it was great because they had more talent to work with,
Yeah, well, Thunder told me the only time he really had a consistent training partner was when Jason Helton came.
Yeah.
Whom I've never met, but I've never heard a single person say a negative thing about Jason Helton. By all accounts, he's the nicest guy in the business.
Yeah, very nice. Very good temperament, just a very easygoing guy. I think he moved to Australia and settled there, and I think he might still be working on some independent promotions there, but I know Morris, just he really blossomed when he had a chance to work with you and Divine, and just more genuine matches, not just training drills, So yeah.
Were you at the Hobima show when we almost started that riot?
I missed that. There was a riot. I mean, the natives were certainly restless that night.
They were pissed off.
I don't mean that as a cliche, but I always say it's best to send fans home happy, right? And
that was definitely the last time we did anything like that on a reservation where we screwed the First Nations guy over in the main event. We never did that again.
No, especially when it's sort of a loud, arrogant, bombastic Afro-American like Robbie Dix, right? And he was hardly subtle about that, and people just went nuts. I heard they were
and the whitest guy in the world, Johnny Devine, right?
Yeah. It was scary, because it was out of control. But I wasn't there that night. But I don't think that was the best management decision to have Thunder get screwed in the main event like that. Even though fans knew he didn't lose legitimately, but it just showed they were so upset. And especially with Aboriginals who've been screwed so much in their lives and had so much taken away from them, and not just talking about the residential schools or anything, but just the social stigma, that a lot of them have been associated with, and to have your favorite, get screwed and lose in the main event like that. Well, there was no filtering for those fans. They just
Yeah.
lost it. And
Well, and at the time, I was just like, oh wow, look at the heat we drew. You know what I mean? But now listen to what you're saying is like, oh yeah, that had a much deeper. That was much deeper than I think I realized at the time.
yeah, it was scary what potentially could have happened. Because there was a riot, and luckily I think the wrestlers got out of there unscathed, but a lot of stuff got damaged. A lot of
Well, I had to send my wife home. Like I had to send Wendy out with the baby faces and pick her up in Pinoca. Right. Like I mean, don't get me wrong. It was somewhat exciting because we were young and didn't understand our own mortality. But at the same time, looking back, it was probably the scariest night I had in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, we had no security or police there, and I think anyone who was there, they were all kind of on the same side. They were just in an uproar. They were angry. They were upset.
Yeah.
It was miscarriage of justice, and the Aboriginal favorite was getting screwed again,
Yeah. Well, see, and like I understand the logic of the idea. We'll screw him over and then they'll pay to come back next time and see him avenge this loss. I appreciate that psychology. We definitely should have found a different way to do it though.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we couldn't go back there. I think there was so much damage to the arena. We weren't allowed to run another show there, I think, for like 6 or 8 months. In fact, the next time we ran there was with Tatanka, I think about 6-7 months later. And the crowd wasn't as big as it should have been because I think people were still pissed off. They're still upset, that Thunder got screwed, So I think in a lot of situations, especially spot shows, you want to send the fans home happy. If it's where you're coming back the next week, you're running a regular venue, you can do an angle, and sometimes the heels have to get away with cheating, or something controversial. Yeah, and that fuels the fans' desire to see a rematch and justice restored. But if it's a place you're not coming back for a few months, especially like a reservation, doesn't matter so much what you do in the preliminary matches, but that main event, babyface should go over and send the fans home happy.
Yeah, I know that now, Ross.
Yeah. I would have advocated if I was there that night for that, but and it didn't work out. But it was.
Well, if there's anything I'd say about Bruce, though, he knew how to draw some heat, man. He could get us to draw some heat.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Robbie Dix, he could play on that, right? Because kind of true to his character, he could be very cocky and conceited, and and I think that fueled the fire even more.
Well, not only was he cocky and conceited, when you see him as an athlete, he could back it up, which pisses people off even more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it just made it a little harder to take, because it was somebody like him, and he was good in that role,
For sure, he was a great heel.
Sometimes he took it too far because he had a short career run and sometimes just wanted to do things his way, right? And had a sense of entitlement, I guess. And I won't go into a lot of details about his behavior or off-campus activities, but there are numerous incidents, where there's abuse of females, or confining them against their own will, and that caught up with him so many times, it cost him his position with the WWE, and then he was in prison for it, and that's where he died, so sometimes art can imitate life too much, so.
Yeah, well, yeah, and and that's exactly. I mean, sometimes you got to know when that where to stop that line when you leave the ring.
Yeah, absolutely. You're an entertainer, you're a celebrity, but you're even higher profile, than most people, and you're not going to get away with abusing females or just being involved with anything that's criminal, right? And as a wrestler, you've got to maintain that level of respect, because no one's above the law,
Well, and
whether you're a politician or wrestler or entertainer, whoever you are,
Well, I certainly don't say this from a place of moral high ground, and I want to make that clear. But the other thing is, first of all, the first word in professional wrestler is professional. Try and conduct yourself accordingly. You know what I mean? And the other thing is, you're not just representing yourself, you represent all of us. And for me, having been, I've gone to college and stuff. So I know that people kind of lowbrow wrestling, they look down on it. And when these types of stories come out, or these types of things are consistently what you hear about wrestlers, it makes us all look bad. And that creates a problem for me. You know what I mean? Not because me personally, but to me, it's one thing to make yourself look like an asshole, but don't embarrass your family. You know what I mean? And that's what that's kind of my whole thing.
It reflects negatively on other people. You all get tainted.
Exactly right.
As low lives, right, or scumbags or whatever.
Well, 99% of the players in the NFL are great guys, but the 1% we hear about are the guys that beat up their wives. And so it makes everybody else look bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So
people use statements like all the players in the NFL. Wait, you just can't. People paint with broad strokes when it comes to those negative activities.
Yeah, absolutely. What I wanted to ask you, because I know when Stampede kind of finished one run at the end of I guess that maybe end of 2000 maybe, and and you worked with another promotion, and
you bet.
And I kind of wondered what had happened. I think Bad News Allen was initially the booker for that promotion, because he had left Stampede where he had been ring announcing with Mauro Ranallo.
Right.
This was promotion that Joe Clark was involved with. Joe was a good guy. I actually liked him very much.
Joe was,
but I kind of wondered what happened with Bad News, because he was the booker, but was he just too hard to deal with, or did he just kind of quit? He wasn't happy with his role?
This is a kind of a long, convoluted story, but Ross, I respect you too much to not bullshit you or to bullshit you.
Yeah, and if you're not comfortable.
I'm 100% comfortable. I never want to paint anybody in a bad light that's not around to defend themselves. And there's people in this story that aren't around to defend themselves. So long story short, basically, we were starting to struggle with Stampede financially. Things were getting tough. We were owed for a lot of shows. And Alex Karmas actually approached me because at the time WWE was really in full swing. And Alex fancied himself a pretty serious businessman, and he was doing all right for himself at the time. And so he wanted to start a promotion. His idea, he didn't understand how hard wrestling was. So his idea was he was going to start this promotion, take it public, make $1 billion, just like Vince McMahon did. He didn't see the 40 years of work Vince McMahon put in before that happened. Anyways, he approached us and wanted to start this promotion, and we all said no. Initially I was very loyal to the Harts. Everything I have from this business, they gave to me, and literally gave to me. And I always respected that. And Alex was my coach when I won the national championship. So there was also a bit of a relationship there. And, he kind of said to me, Jordy, when's the last time any of you guys died of loyalty and respect? And at the time it was a good point, but looking back in life, it's not, there's more to the statement when you look deeper into it. Right. So at the time, the decision was made by myself and a few others that we were going to leave Stampede and go to this other promotion. So originally it was Alex Karmas. And then I brought in, and I don't want to sue anybody else, but he wanted to do it. And I said, the only way I would even be involved in something like this is if you could bring somebody like Jason Anderson on board, because the rest of us don't know anything to do this. So that's when I went to Jason Anderson, approached him. He was very, very leery about it initially. But kind of thought, okay, it's an opportunity. He kind of liked some of the opportunities that were there. And so we kind of jumped into it. And then, so Jason was originally, to be honest, the booker. And, so he was originally doing things. Yeah, and so we were rolling. Things were going pretty good. They were drawn okay. There was a lot of paper in the crowd. This was
at Fire Park, right?
Yeah, you bet. And
I mean, they were actually. I remember being there for a few shows. Good location, good venue.
Yeah, and I mean, they were drawn. On paper, they were drawn 1,300 a show, and I could say probably half of that was a papered crowd. You know what I mean? I had an idea what the numbers were. I'd go to the meetings on Monday. So, and then it became really hard to work with Alex. And I'm not trying to, again, he's not here. So he just became really, really hard to deal with. So there was a point where we were trying to book Jason and I had decided there was an original decision that Bill Yates was going to get the title. But there was something that Jason and I saw in Yates. And again, I don't want to shit on Yates, not here to defend himself. There was just something Jason and I saw in Yates. We didn't think he was ready to be the champion. And it was just one of those, it was an attitude thing, nothing else. Yeah. And so we decided at the time, the most over guy that we wanted to see over was a guy called Mad Dog McFly. And so Jason and I had a pretty long conversation and decided, you know what, we're going to switch this. We don't think Yates should have the title. Mad Dog should have it. And we kind of went to the next booking meeting, had this discussion, and the office got mad. Alex was mad because he had told people that Yates was going to be the champion. So it was going to make him look bad. You know what I mean? So Jason and I were kind of both like, we don't give a shit if it makes you look bad. This is what's best for business kind of thing. And he, kind of lost his temper. And so we decided at the time, all right, I guess we're just going to leave it. Well, that was the straw for Jason because he didn't need this shit. So he quit. And again, now I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because I've left the place I was working and it wasn't the best. I might have burned that bridge. And now I'm stuck in this place where I wasn't sure about going in the first place. And the guy that was there to kind of make it all work wasn't there anymore. So then I became the booker by proxy. And so Bad News was around and I kind of went to Bad News and said, hey, I don't have the experience to do this. Will you go to the office, talk to them, and would you become the booker? And then at that time, Bad News was, and again, this is all told to me well after, like some of this came to me after Bad News passed away. So again, I don't want to shit on Bad News.
No.
But at that time, he'd sent tapes away to Japan for, I want to say Chris Lazansky, Cyborg, Pollock, Divine, and I forget who the fifth guy was. There was 5 guys in this group. And long story short, Japan didn't call any of those guys. They called me. And
they called you. Was this New Japan or?
Yeah, this was Black Cat called me from New Japan.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, I won't bore you with that. I won't bore you with that entire story of how I so I went to Bad News and I said, hey, I don't know if it was you that put me over to New Japan because Ross, I'd never sent a tape or anything. So I couldn't even figure out how they got my phone number. So obviously I thought somebody had to give them my information. I went to News and I said, hey man, if you put me over, thank you. And he got kind of weird and said, this sounds weird. Let me call you back. And he called me back half an hour later and said, New Japan's never heard of you. And so I kind of got upset. And the next morning, this is when, caller ID just became a thing. This is like you say, 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
So I pressed 1 on my phone, redialed the number in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning so I could get him at a reasonable time in Japan. And a lady answered the phone and I said, hi, can I speak to Black Cat, please? And he came on the phone and I know it was the guy I talked to. And he said, no, I've never heard of you. Somebody must be ribbing you. And so I got really upset. And I essentially, for right or wrong, I blamed Bad News. And I phoned Bad News and I kind of told him exactly what I thought of him. And it wasn't good. And so then I went to the office.
Do you think did you think he kiboshed it?
Yeah, I thought at the time, because one of the things that Black Cat kept saying to me over the phone call was, I never take money from the boys. And he talked to me about the tax system and how they pay you extra so you don't have to pay. So they pay you extra to make sure you go home with what they want you to make after taxes.
Yeah.
So when I talked to Jason Anderson, I said, George, that's not somebody ribbing you. They're not talking to you about taxes on a rib. Like this is, that was the call. So anyways, I went to the office and I was gutted, Ross. Like I was really, 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 really upset. And I just thought, if somebody I don't know, or somebody that I trusted and respect on a certain level is going to fuck me over like that, I don't want anything to do with this business. And that's when I actually stopped wrestling for a year.
Yeah.
And
it's unfortunate because you would have been as appealing as anybody to go to Japan, from that class,
Well, and it wasn't a sure thing. I mean, they were going to bring me to Mexico.
You weren't a hard sell. You were a great commodity. You would have worked hard. So I don't know why Alan wouldn't have endorsed you or recommended you.
Well, what it was is he sent these 5, and what I said, from what I was told, I was told after, George, News didn't fuck you over, but he didn't do you any favors. You know what I mean? And so what it was he sent tapes over for these 5 guys, and I was on every one of those tapes. So the mentality was, why would we call all these 5 guys? This guy's on all the tapes. Why don't we call him?
And they were impressed with what they saw with you.
Well, and they also didn't want to pay the gathered that I got from my initial conversation with Black Cat was they didn't want to pay Bad News and agent's fee. So they were going to the guy that could come over that wasn't going to, they weren't going to.
Yeah, I see.
So there was a lot at play there, right? And and that's truthfully, so that's what happened. That's how that promotion started. That's how news got
I never
into
knew
booking.
that side of things, you know.
Yeah. And now I'll be honest with you. At that time, Joe had come in. Joe had been introduced after Jason left and news was getting kind of hard to deal with. We were introduced with Joe Clark as our partner, who, I mean, not a secret. Joe was involved in more than
Joe
one
kind of
murder.
taken over from Alex?
No, they were kind of working as partners to try and control me, I think, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So that's why one of the reasons I thought if I'm going to get out of this promotion, I'm going to have to stop wrestling because there's no way I can just quit. You know what I mean? So then, to be honest with you, as mad as I was at news, and this is the God's honest truth, they wanted to go after him over this. Like there was people that wanted to go after Bad News because they thought that he screwed me over. And I was the one that went to them and said, it ain't worth it. Just leave it alone.
Yeah.
So people would say like, oh, you had heat with Bad News. And I wasn't thrilled with news at the time, but at the same time, I certainly didn't want to create any more heat out of it either.
No. Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of respect for him and his legacy, and, you know, he'd done so much in the industry, and, you know, and it was unfortunate because I remember when he was hosting a show with Mauro and all, and he put you over.
Yeah, he was always good to me, man.
You know, he was always impressed. He was always, you know, putting the heels over more. That was his style, but he always talked about, you know, Dick Raines, as you were called then, you know, just being a great technician, a hard worker, and, you know, had the most praise for it. I couldn't understand why.
Yeah, it was the office that was hard for news to work with.
You disrespected him.
Yeah.
Or bypassed him, you know, and that's really so unfortunate because he should have been trying to showcase you as much as anybody. You know, you had as much to offer Japan or Germany or Mexico or any place as all those guys. You know, especially as a good heel. So to me, it would have been a win-win situation if Alan had booked you there and given you his endorsement. You know, but yeah.
I mean, it is what it is now. I mean, that to me, that's one of those situations I look back on the business and think, if only, you know what I mean? What would have been different? Because they, you know, the call was, we want you to go to Mexico, work out with Dr. Wagner and wrestle down there for 2 weeks, then come to Japan, train in the dojo for a week. So there was a really good opportunity there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry it missed you there because you really deserved that, you know, and you would have been full value for any of those promoters.
You know, and as much as I really, really appreciate that, Ross, I look back on it at a certain level, but I'm also so happy with where my life is now that it's kind of inconsequential at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you had a great career with Stampede, with PWA, and you know, I don't think you ever worked for any other promotions than them. You know, maybe,
I worked a little for RCW here and there. You know, I've done some little shit that nothing of name.
Yeah, I don't think you worked for you know, Can-Am, which is kind of restarted now, which is kind of interesting. Or what was the one in Edmonton, the Massive Damage ran?
You know, Monster Pro. No, I worked for
kind of more of a hardcore promotion, I guess. But
there was a promotion that was a lot around for. There was a promotion that I actually got blamed. This is a funny story to me. I actually got blamed for shutting down a promotion one time, Ross. I can't even remember the name of the promotion, but what the hell was his name? The Orderly was involved with it.
Oh, The Orderly, yeah.
And again, nice enough guy, and I'm not here to piss on him. So I had taken that year off after the New Japan thing, and I was just starting to come back. And these guys reached out to me and asked if I was interested in working. And so I said sure, and we came up with a price and figured it out, and I went up there. And when I got there, they started, you know, okay, well, yeah, this is your money, but you got to pay your license and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden your money gets whittled down to fairly little. But again, you're breaking in, you're getting a foothold in a promotion, you just sort of nod and smile and pick up the paycheck. So then fast forward and PWA starting, and Kurt phones me, which, you know, Kurt and I have a great rapport. And he kind of offers to pay me considerably more than this other promotion. And in that locker room, he's got Chris Steele and the Highlander, you know, he's got all these good guys in there that are friends of mine. So at the end of the day, when we're talking more than double the money, there's no way I'm staying over here. This is a business to me. And I've only worked one match there. So it's not like I have this reel, but I was booked for a return.
You
Yeah.
didn't have a binding contract with them.
Oh, hell no. And, and I was, and quite frankly, they treated me like a nobody kind of, and I don't want to come across the wrong way, but in that small pond, I wasn't necessarily a nobody. And so he kind of treated me like a nobody. And so it was just kind of like, okay, well, Kurt's, I'm Cinderella at the ball right now. Kurt's offering me more money. He handed me the glass slipper. I'm just going to go over there then. And so essentially, apparently, when I decided not to wrestle there, other people that were wrestling there decided not to go either. And so then he couldn't get people to work. And that was all my fault. So that's why that promotion shut down. That was my fault.
I think all the wrestlers were free independent agents and they could work for whoever they wanted. And, if they were paying them that well or looking after them that well, I'm sure they would have stayed, well, but they may not have been running as often,
Well, and it's another thing to be loyal, like when we were
job security for these wrestlers. And,
well, when we were wrestling for Stampede, you guys were giving us so many shows that it wouldn't make sense for us to wrestle for a competing promotion in the same city. Do you know what I mean? You're giving us the exposure. You're investing your time and money in us. So to me, I don't mind that loyalty. Excuse me. But when you've only wrestled one match somewhere and you've been sitting at home for a year, so it's not like there's a lot of promotion behind your name, and the guy treated you like a nobody anyways. What are you telling me now? You're just blaming me for your bullshit.
Yeah. They're just kind of using you as a scapegoat because they couldn't hang on to their talent, and the promotion probably wasn't very solid to begin with,
Well, and as much as I love me, Ross, as much as I love me, if your whole promotion is fucking running on me showing up in your locker room, you're probably gonna have a big problem later on anyway.
Yeah. So a big question people are asking Duke, and I don't know if you know the answers. PWA gonna start running again because they've taken a long hiatus during the pandemic, and RCW has run, and Canada is restarted, but is Kurt going to restart PWA or not?
I heard a rumbling a little while ago. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to kind of speak out of school. I believe there's something going to happen in early 2022, and if it's what I think it was, it's going to be something fairly big. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm actually going to have Kurt on maybe in the new year and start talking to him about this. Cause like you say, no disrespect to Squiggy or anybody else. I mean, Steven Styles is, for somebody that started out with not much of a place in the business, has really carved himself out a great spot in the business. So I want to commend him on everything he's done in Alberta for Alberta wrestling. But at the same time, I mean, in the few places I've worked, Kurt's kind of been the easiest guy to work with as far as what I've been able to do. So to me, it's kind of, I like to see him run because that's a good locker room for the boys to be in.
Yeah.
And again, nothing against the RCW locker room. It was always just, I guess probably because my days going back, I came up with a lot of those guys through Stampede, then the lineage from TJ on to, Michael Richard Blaze and Brandon Van Danielson. So there's a comfort level there. So, but I don't know, man. I just think that PWA runs a better show, and I don't want to piss on RCW because they've got a really, really good roster of talent now, and I haven't been to one of their shows for a while, so maybe I should go.
Yeah, some of the PWA guys are working for them at the moment because because Kurt's not running,
Yeah. And the upside is, what do they say? A rising tide floats all ships. Like if he's got good talent coming over to RCW, then hopefully it elevates his product and more guys will come and work for him.
Yeah.
Steven's a good guy, man. Like I don't want to piss on him
because RCW, they probably have too many guys now. And the shows are a bit long, and because they're trying to give everybody a spot on the card, and yet it's hard to overlook or deny someone who's established or proven the PWA and not create a spot for them. You hate to see somebody else not get a match or be shoved down the undercard, but if you have a chance to use a Chucky Blaze, on a RCW show, you
do it.
Exploit him and capitalize him,
and it's one of the things I even looked at, and I know Otto, Otto's a good guy, and I'm not trying to shit on him either. But I looked at his poster the other day for what the show Ken M's running, and if my count is right, if my memory's correct, I looked at he had 20 guys and gals on that roster. That's a fat ass payroll, right? Unless you're either not paying well, paying based on, percentages of the gate. I'm not sure how, that's a tough payroll. 20 guys on an independent
I
show.
imagine maybe a lot of their students from their training school.
That's what I'm thinking, because I don't know a lot of the names, so I don't want to just assume that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was like, wow, 20 people on a card. Like, I would say you'd go 16 guys max.
Yeah. Sometimes too much is less, Jordy. You know, and I say that from experience. You know, if you're, especially if you've had a late start to a show for whatever reasons, and then you know, you feature 6-7 matches, then an intermission, and then another 3 matches, then it's after 11 o'clock. You know, even though you've given them so much content, it's overkill. It's too much. You know, so
Yeah.
you know, I'd rather see 5 to 6 good matches on a show, and rather than try and fit everyone on the card, and sometimes lesser matches, and some of these guys they're being put on the shows just because they help them set up the rings, or they pay to train, but they're not actually ready for that exposure yet. You know, and it unfortunately affects the quality of the whole show when we've got guys that are just too green, or they're not ready for that exposure, or they're injuring somebody, right? But
Yeah.
you know,
I think you go with a 16 person roster, right? Or 14 people. You go with six matches, a tag match. So that gives right there, you know, maybe you throw in a triple threat, but your payroll is about 14, 15 people plus your referees and ring announcers. You know, like
it's tough to spread it 16 ways, you know. When you've got all that talent there, you know, and if you're wrestling just because you want to be on the card, but you're not getting paid anything, you know, it's kind of exploitation, right? It's, you know, you're not getting paid, but you know, you're that desperate to be in the ring, you know, you're undervaluing yourself, right? You know, and as a booker, it's not good business ethics to put someone in the ring and say, well, I've got so many others on the show, I can't pay you, but are you still willing to work? You know?
Yeah.
Well,
excuse me.
You know, I don't agree with that. You know, even
and it's a detriment to the product. It really is. You know, I mean, people, you only get so many chances to disappoint a fan. So if you, like you say, if you have a 10, 12, you know, you have a 10 match card and 4 of the matches are good, and all 4 of those matches are at the very end, the fans are all tired by then anyways. Right. So it's a really tough thing. I think you run 6 matches, you run 4, you have your intermission, you sell your t-shirts and popcorn, you finish off with a popcorn match and a main event and call it a day.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree.
You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel with this stuff.
No.
So
no, it's just like a movie or a concert. It should be a 2-hour experience, right? And if it's much less than that, you haven't given them enough quality or content. And if it's more than that, it's overstating it. It's too long. It's too much. Right? You know, especially for, you know, some fans who have a pretty limited attention span. You know, and you're making them sit through a longer show, and they're actually not enjoying it or appreciating it, even though you're giving them more content. But it's too much, right? Or it's not a very high caliber. So yeah.
All right. I want to touch on one more thing before we go. Something that inspires me a little bit about you. You were just recently in another play that I unfortunately was working too much and couldn't make it out to. But tell me a little bit about your stage acting career, Ross.
Yeah.
You've been in numerous plays. How many plays have you been in?
Yeah. No, I know you've done a couple of plays with Workshop Theater, and I think it's called Confederation Theater now. But you know, we did a comedy production called Opening Night at the Pump House, and it was hilarious. You know, it was a Stephen Foster play. He's a really good Canadian playwright. I think it's a 3rd play I've been that's Stephen Foster wrote, but it was great. We just had a really good cast. Our good mutual friend Alan LaBeouf was supposed to be in the play, and he had some health issues, and he had to step out at the not at the last minute, but during the rehearsals, and we luckily replaced him with another guy who was a really good actor. But it went really well. It was we had good crowds considering the COVID restrictions. You know, we could only have 50 spectators in there a night, and we had to spread them out, and everybody had to wear masks. Proof vaccination, and we had full crowds just about every night. The weekends were completely sold out, and that was great, you know. But you know, for me, it's a great experience to entertain the audience and draw different reactions every night, especially with comedy. You can make audiences laugh. That's a job well done. Like you played your part convincingly, and for me that was great. I had a very comical part in the play, and every night, I think even Louis Hobson came to one of our shows, and he was the loudest one in the audience.
Well, good for you.
Yeah, he was just
I've heard he can be
roaring with laughter right from the opening scene. And that to me was such a compliment, right? That he was so impressed with our production. But yeah, it's a little like wrestling, less physical, but you've got to know your character, your lines, your movements, and make sure you're not blocking anybody on stage.
Live theater is the scariest thing in the world to me.
Yeah,
it's horrifying.
Yeah, like you're so worried about forgetting a line or missing your cue to come on stage or something, and it sometimes happens, and you have to be so focused and really concentrating on your role, and it's a little bit like that with wrestling, but with the stage, yeah, again, if you miss a line or a part, yeah, it's tough. Then you have to kind of just improvise and hope the audience doesn't notices it, or somebody else on the stage can kind of back you up, and then you just have to carry on, and finish the rest of the play. But it's also helped me teach as well. When I can teach stage elements, when I'm teaching modern plays or even Shakespeare plays to my students, I can say this is about intended reaction or suspense or drama, right, or foreshadowing, right, or even flashbacks, and all those things that good movies and TV shows incorporate, right? And
that gives you so much more insight.
It does, so that's why I enjoy stage performing so much, so I think my experiences with wrestling and maybe with teaching have all blended with stage acting somewhat, so it's been great. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we'll do another one in 2022.
You know what, if we hate ourselves and want to waste a bunch of time, what we should do is sit down with LaBeouf and come up with some sort of a play. I think between the three of us, we could probably write something fairly funny.
Yeah, he did pretty well with his Love on the Ropes or whatever. He
that was a fun play.
I think the problem with that for me was that it didn't actually involve any wrestling. It was all behind the scenes stuff in the dressing rooms, and about angles and who was working against who, but the end result still needed to be some kind of a match, and it didn't have that. It'd be very hard to construct a ring, I guess, but I think the audience would want to see, some kind of match that comes out of all this dialogue. But it was still brilliantly written. You had so many puns and one-liners.
Well, then maybe instead of rewriting the whole thing, we just tweak that one a little bit and include the rest.
Got with our talent, we could actually stage a wrestling match. I think it'd be hard to. I mean, if you could build a smaller ring for something, and teach a few guys how to do rope works, even if it's a very short, superficial match.
Yeah,
I think audiences wouldn't be too critical of it. So,
no, I think you're right. Well, and I think that people. I mean, if you were worried about how, solid the work was going to look, you could even make it more farcical, I guess,
Yeah, so absolutely.
You could have some fun with it that way too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Something to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, something to think about. All right, Ross, on that note, my friend, I'm going to let you get out of here.
Duke Durango, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and you're a credit to the industry. You did so much for wrestling, and thank you for your hard work. And how you inspired so many, that you wrestled against, and a good leader and commander in the dressing room, and really one of the most unselfish guys in the industry. And I take a lot of pleasure in saying that I helped coach and mentor you, but you had a lot of positive influences, and you made the most of them, and really so much raw talent, and you're an incredible performer, and one of the best heels I've seen in the last 20 years, because you you got your heat in the ring. You incited the fans, but you never caused a riot. You never had a lawsuit. I don't think you ever had one
No,
incident
no
where you
lawsuits.
assaulted a fan or took things too far. Like you knew your limit, right? And you still got that desired reaction, and really just did so much for the guys you wrestled with. I mean, I remember the matches you had with Pete Wilson and Greg Pollock and Red Thunder, and everybody was so excited to work with you. They knew that you were going to give them a great match. I think guys looked more forward to working with you than anybody, because they knew you were there for them, and you were just a great leader and brought the best out in everybody.
Thank you so much, Ross. That's high praise coming from somebody that I hold in as high a regard as you. And I don't want to, sit here and just blow sunshine up each other's butts, but
No.
Everything that you just described that I am in the business comes from you and Bruce. We are obviously introduced to you guys by the Smith family, but everything that I was in a ring, everything that I was in a locker room, I learned from you and Bruce about being a leader and how to respect the business. And I can't thank you enough for everything that you've given me in my life through wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much, Ross, and I'll talk to you very soon.
Okay. We'll keep in touch.
Merry Christmas to you.
You have a great Christmas.
Thanks a lot.
All the best to you and Wendy. Bye-bye.
Same to you.
Duke, you suck.
You shut your mouth.